would now. I looked out the frost-covered window to see the snow still falling from the bright sky. Everything was white. The lack of color sent shivers down my spine. I sighed as I looked out towards the house across the street. The Christmas lights were still on from the night before. Too much confusion had happened over the past few days for anyone to remember the simple things like that. It had been almost 4 days now, but the snow still hadn't stopped. Or had it? I hadn't noticed if it had. I hadn't been noticing much recently, but of course I knew why. I was told time and time again that what I was going through was normal, natural, but that didn't cease the pain from flooding through my body all the same. I heard a knock at my door, but was too entranced by the cruel beauty of the colorless snow falling from the sky to get up. There was a knock once again, but I couldn't bring myself to do anything but stare. The door opened, and the smell of my mother's cooking flooded the room, penetrating my senses. It had been 4 days since I'd last eaten. The smell once would have made me run to the kitchen at the speed of an Olympic champion, but now it just made me want to puke. I heard my mother's voice like a blur of sound in the back of my mind, but whatever she said didn't mean a thing. I couldn't hear her words, yet I still seemed to know what she was saying. It was as if I had already heard this so many times before. She'd be telling me it was time to leave now, that everyone was waiting, that I needed to put on a brave face for the kids, that this was what Mark would have wanted. And while I couldn't bring myself to hear her terminology, it was still being shoved into my mind. Her thoughts were clouding my system. A gentle hand rested on my shoulder, and almost as if she pushed a trigger on my body, I stood up and walked with her towards the door, then down the stairs, and finally made my way outside. I waited for her to remind me to grab a jacket, the way she always did the instant I tried to step outside, but this time she didn't. However, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her grab my black jacket anyway, thinking that I would probably want it later. We both knew that out of the 2 jackets I owned, one black, one brown, that in a heartbeat I would always choose to wear the brown. But of course today was different. I guess she knew it would be a very long time before I would be able to lay eyes on that jacket again. I made it outside before she did, and I walked towards the car. I knew she would have stopped me had she been here. I knew she didn't want me driving anymore, yet I still headed towards the driver's side. I wasn't sure that I could handle being a passenger again. I slid into the car, the leather seats like ice against my skin and through my dress, but I didn't seem to mind it in the way that I once had. I was always cold, the reason the brown jacket had been such an appropriate gift, but anymore I wasn't bothered by it. Nothing mattered to me anymore. I had already started the car by the time my mom arrived. With a deep, disapproving sigh, she opened the door and sat down in the passenger seat. She opened her mouth at least 3 times, wanting to tell me what she thought about what I was doing, but each time she shut her mouth, changed her mind, and let me deal with the pain. I was a ghost anyway. There was no reason for arguing with someone as unresponsive as I had become. She tried to speak to me again, but her voice began to drone in my ear, and I quickly turned on the radio before pulling out of the driveway. I don't remember the drive to the church. It seemed to me that what should have taken at least a half hour was over in the blink of an eye. But isn't that the way it always is right before you're about to say goodbye? Some would say that it was beautiful outside in the pure white snow. I would say that the bleakness of the pollution falling towards the ground was sickening and made me question the sanity of those who could possibly enjoy something so painful. The interior of the church was nice, I suppose, but of course it wasn't Mark's style. His favorite color was black, and his favorite pastime was writing music for his band. Music was his life. That was probably the thought that scared me the most. Was the fact that everything I thought about Mark would now have to be in the past tense. He didn't have a future anymore. During the service, they spoke about this wonderful Mark Ebsen, but yet I didn't seem to know who this 17-year-old boy was. The boy that they spoke of was a complete stranger to me. He wasn't my Mark. Why were they honoring this person that had never existed when my best friend was suddenly gone? Who were they to him when I was the person he loved more than life itself? They didn't know him. I was the only one who did. So why were they telling these hard lies and calling them memories? My mom put her arm around my shoulder, trying to comfort me, telling me it would be okay. But sadly, I knew the truth. It would never be okay again. Mark was gone, and he wasn't coming back. They started to talk about the accident, what they thought had happened, but they really didn't know. Had they been there? Had they seen the black ice on the road right before the car tires slipped over it? Had they felt the cold, soft, supposedly comforting snow? The snow that was supposed to protect everything. Everyone. Snow was supposed to be a good thing, but yet it had killed my boyfriend. These people who were talking about all the great things Mark had accomplished, things that he never wanted, things that didn't mean anything to him, hadn't seen his blood in the snow the way I had. They hadn't been the last ones to speak to him before he died. They hadn't been wearing his favorite brown jacket as they watched him struggling to survive moments before his life was maliciously taken from him. The painful moments from that dark and cold night haunted my mind and brought me back to the scariest time of my life.